the whole thing feels so disjointed. And that's really my main problem. I don't know Mafia history as much as I would like. I think it's a really interesting, like, I'm really interested in, like, raw power, but like Mafia, warlords, these kinds of things where law just breaks down, right? That's just an interesting social dynamic. Reading about that kind of society is interesting to me because I find it fascinating. And the Mafia definitely qualifies as that. And so I would like to know more about the Mafia history, and I learned very little about that from watching this movie. I felt inspired to kind of go back and like read, especially because Vito and Frank are historical characters, and most people in this movie are historical characters. I went back and just started reading a little bit about what actually happened. Like the ending scene where Frank calls this meeting and tips off the police and is intentionally late so that almost everybody gets arrested, and that's how the mob kind of dissolves. That pretty much really happened. Like in all the descriptions I've read, like that part is one to one how they did it. And that was the most fun I had watching the movie. Because now, like, when I realized that Frank was late on purpose and that they set up this whole thing about the police have been tipped off, I think, of alcohol running in the area or whatever, right? And that's how they stumbled into this. Like, that's all how it really happened, according to the accounts I've read. And that's really cool. And I think it's not coincidence that that is the part I really enjoyed watching. Where all the other stuff, it's just, it never really kind of landed with me for all the reasons we've discussed. But then in the last 15 minutes, it switches into a pretty linear storyline about setting up the big meeting and Frank setting up the trap and the trap springing and he gets away. And that part, I think, was really cool. And if the entire movie had been like this, where that had been, like, the entire movie is kind of him setting up these machinations, this Rube Goldberg machine to get out of the mob because that is not a job you can retire from, and he tries anyway, and what it takes to get to that point, and what he has to do to actually accomplish that goal, and why it is his goal. Like, all of that is interesting. And when they actually did, like, the big payoff, I was there, but I felt like this would be so much better if this had been built up for 2 hours, right? Where, all the pieces had been slowly moved into position and we had been explained, like, all the constraints under which Frank operates. Like, even though he's so powerful, he cannot simply make a decision like that because he's dependent on the respect he gets from everybody else, and that requires him to act in a certain way, and that is why he cannot act openly. And all of this is all really cool. But why is it just those 15 minutes? The history is so cool. You can just take from that and kind of just adapt moments that lead up to this climax. And that's cool, and I wish they had done that. I think that would have been a much better. Like, you could even do it differently, where it focuses on, like, Frank maybe setting up the trap, and then he explains the different pieces to us, but in a non-linear way. That could have been a way to do it. Right? You know what I mean? Like, I think there would have been ways to do this. It just felt like the way they actually did it was not terribly motivated. It did not really seem like I was getting just a very particular slice of this history. You know what I mean?